What's up, guys? Welcome to a little off-season content with Andy and I, your Flex Friday bros, coming at you with some Dynasty content now. We are going to be redrafting the 21 through 23 rookie classes. We're going to do Superflex, tight end premium. Andy and I are basically just going to go just one after another. Andy's taking odds. I'm taking evens. And we're just going to kind of see how these three classes stack up against each other, who falls where, which class maybe has more people from it, how we're valuing age. I don't know. Andy, do you want to add any notes?
I'm just excited. It's Dynasty season, baby. It's the exciting thing after that, letdown or thrill of championship weekend where the whole season comes down to it. And then you feel just that little bit of depression that sinks in where it's like, dude, fantasy is over. And then you're
100%. I always find some of my leagues group chats are actually more active during the off season because no one got anything to do, basically. So Andy, why don't you get us kicked off at 1-1 here? Who are you going to be taking if you were on the clock 1-1, combining the 21, 22, and 23 rookie class prospects and players?
So honestly, I feel like there's a couple different ways you could go here, but I think the safest route for Superflex is CJ Stroud. He was in the MVP consideration for a bit. He turned the Texans around from, the bottom of the barrel franchise to potentially a playoff team if they can win this weekend. He's shown all the things that he's the guy. He's had some monster games. He's passed the eye test. He's got the numbers to back it up. He's 22 years old. I think that, there's a lot of great receivers that you can choose from here. There's great running backs you can choose from here, but he would still be my number one pick between all of them.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I have him as my number one QB out of this group and my number one player if I'm going out of these three classes. I definitely do tend to lean towards quarterbacks in Superflex leagues. I'm a little QB slut, man. I really am when it comes down to it. I might change my freaking Twitter to that, man, because that's really what I am. But I'm with you. He looked so good. I just don't really see how you could pass him up at this point if you had your choice of the pack.
Yeah.
So for me, even though I just talked so much about the quarterbacks there, if I was on the clock and CJ Stroud was not there, I'm going Jamar Chase here. And I just find him as such an elite asset. My number 2 Dynasty wide receiver right behind Justin Jefferson. Him, Lamb, Justin Jefferson, tier of their own. I think Lamb kicked up into that tier for me this year just with his performance. But nothing else to really say about Chase, man. The dude's an absolute stud. When Joe Burrow's on the field, he is as dominant as it comes. Obviously, he kind of tailed off a bit with Joe Burrow off the field, but he's going to be tied to Burrow for probably his entire career, but at least the next 5-6 years probably. And that's what I'm looking for. It is very hard to trade for a player of this caliber. So if you have the chance to take them, you go for it.
Yeah. And, he's going to just turn 24 going into next season. So even though he was drafted in 2021, which is the earliest class we're doing, he's still so young. And, at that stage, there's not really a huge difference between like 24, 23, especially at wide receiver. But, I don't think it would be a bad move to draft him over Stroud, even if you really just believe in Chase. He's such an elite anchor for your team that you can't go wrong at all. And up next, this is where it gets a little tricky. I think this is really where I think you can go pretty much any position. I'm going to stick at wide receiver, though. I'm going to go Amon-Ra St. Brown. He is kind of a tier below Chase, but just like barely. Like he's almost in kind of a tier of his own dynasty-wise. Maybe with A.J. Brown in there too. But he's such a stud. He was wide receiver 4 in points per game. He had the 3rd most receptions in the league. It's such a great offense. Like there's a bunch of crazy enough. There's a bunch of Lions. Never thought I'd say that up until like last year in my, top guys. And I think just how long he can play and his style of play too, that, you're going to get Amon-Ra for hopefully like 6 or 7 years. And there's for sure going to be an elite 3 years in there for a dynasty window.
Yeah, I get you, man. I think this is kind of where it starts to get a little more confusing. Andy and I did not share our rankings with each other before the video. I definitely probably could have told you he was going to go Stroud, and then Chase was going to be there at 2 for me. As I'm sure he probably thought those were the 2 players that would go
for sure
as well. Amon-Ra just looks so great, dude. He's young, he's involved, he's safe, he gets targets, he catches the ball, he's open. Like, those guys are just irreplaceable. Just like we spoke about Chase, like, you're not going to regret putting a guy like this on your team.
No.
So, right, just like you said, man, it starts to get a little tough. So I'm kind of just going to go back to my roots here, and I'm just going to go Trevor Lawrence. I need a QB, not that we're building rosters, but I just think I can find receivers and running backs later, and it's a lot harder to get up into a upper echelon kind of quarterback. Now, Lawrence had a slightly down season, but let's be real, man. Down season, QB 14 on the year. He missed some games. Like, I feel like that's his floor, is what he did this year. He didn't really look that great. So if Trevor Lawrence is going to give you QB 5 to QB 15 for the next 10 years, sign me up. I'm not trying to overthink this one. He may not ever be Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, but he doesn't really need to be. This is Dynasty. So if you give me 10 years of Trevor Lawrence, I'm going to take it and feel pretty good about my quarterback slot.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I guess for me, I'm definitely a little lower on Trevor Lawrence after the season. I feel like with his weapons, I expect a lot more. But, I get it. He's 24 years old. So it's like there are quarterbacks like who are still in this draft class who are older than he is. But yeah, I mean, if you believe in Trevor Lawrence, I think that's a fine place to take him.
And just to kind of be clear too, I do have Lawrence slightly lower than I had him below, or than I had him to go into the year. But due to the exercise we're doing today, I still think just the quarterbacks start to thin out pretty quickly. So in relation to some of these other players, I still think I would have a hard time not drafting a QB on the clock. So, Andy, let's go to 1-5. Who are you looking at?
Well, for me, I have Anthony Richardson above Trevor Lawrence. Also Brock Purdy right in that same tier with him too. But I think this is where I might go running back. And there's 3 guys, and I literally view them pretty much all as equal in Dynasty with Bijan, Brees, and Gibbs. I think like whoever's your favorite, there's no problem taking any one of them above any others. I'm going to stick with Bijan Robinson here. I'm assuming Arthur Smith is going to be gone and they're going to release him. But, I mean, like, I get the case for Brees. I get the case for Gibbs. They're all fantastic. And, yeah, I don't have a problem with any of those guys in this range.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think there's a clear-cut top 3 for Dynasty RBs, with Christian McCaffrey kind of being that 4, just depending on what your team's looking like.
Yeah.
I still think I would have a hard time not going Bijan. As much as I love Gibbs, he's slightly smaller, and I think he just has to win in a more Alvin Kamara way. Which, look, if you told me I was getting Alvin Kamara, I would take that over Bijan. But that's a very hard player to comp someone to, because Alvin Kamara has been an outlier. And then really just the tiebreaker for Brees and Bijan is just the single knee injury, which is really flipping a coin, because now he's a year past it and Brees looked amazing. So I'm with you, and I'm just going to go right into 1-6, and I'm going running back 2, and I would go Brees Hall here, slightly over Gibbs. I think it really just is, dude. I got to say, I think this would have been more of a coin flip to me, but I think those last 2 weeks really just made me feel, okay, yeah, this is the Brees Hall we were looking at last year, who just is so smooth. I haven't heard a bunch of people talk about this, but I got to say, dude, Brees Hall kind of reminds me of like Lev Bell. I saw him do a couple like stutter kind of runs in those last couple games, and I was like, Damn, because I remember Lev Bell, it's like it didn't look like he was ever running that fast, but he was just like running by people. And he was so good at everything that I just have a hard time not imagining Breece Hall being just this involved in the offense, catching 5 balls a game, just kind of being Christian McCaffrey Jr., right? With the way he's involved. So I love getting a young running back. Similar to quarterback, it dries out so quickly that if you can get one of these elite guys, I think you do it.
Yeah. And, if Aaron Rodgers can come back next year, like you can't imagine this offense being any worse than it was this year. Like no matter what, they're going to have somebody better at quarterback. They're going to hopefully shore up that offensive line, which is only going to make it better for Breece. So yeah, he's, 22 and a half still. So he's got lots of productive years ahead of him. So I like him there. And then I'm going to round out a running back core. I'm going to take Gibbs. It's just boom, 1, 2, 3. He's an absolute stud, 21 years old. So electric. And the fact that, he's definitely probably not going to get the same amount of touches as these other guys, just because there's so many weapons on that offense. And David Montgomery's a good running back too. And they've got him on a fairly long-term contract. They've got the Thunder and the Lightning, but Gibbs is so shifty. And the fact that he kind of took over that lead role at the end of the year is huge. Where Montgomery's going to get carries, but Gibbs is getting the majority of the work, and he's always just one touch away from hitting a 40-yard touchdown. So
yeah, that offense is great. Curious to see what happens with Ben Johnson this offseason. Obviously I wouldn't love it as a Gibbs owner, but I don't think it's really enough to downgrade him for Ben Johnson leaving. Got to imagine my boy, Dan Campbell fan club over here. That is me. And I love some Jahmyr Gibbs, dude. I'm in on him. I just think he's an elite talent. And that's the end of that RB tier for me. So I think that was a good pick. So I'm going to go next here. And I'm actually going to go, I don't know if this is where you would have gone, because we were kind of speaking about Anthony Richardson earlier, I know for you. But at 1-8, I'm actually going to go Garrett Wilson. And I just think he's such a good talent. He has 2 1,000-year seasons with maybe a list of quarterbacks that anyone besides a fantasy obsessive person couldn't even name them. Yeah. And he really is just that good of a player that just his career, he's going to be around, man. If it tends to be more of like a DJ Moore type career, maybe I regret this pick, but even DJ Moore is still a useful asset to have on your team. I think that's the worst case scenario for Garrett Wilson, is just an immense talent that kind of bounces around. But if he can solidify himself, whether it's Rodgers coming back next year or they're moving into some other sort of transition after this Rodgers era that we may get, or who knows? I'm not going to speak on what Aaron Rodgers is going to do. That's an impossible game. But Garrett Wilson is a great talent, and I'm a talent drafter, so I'm going Wilson.
No, and this is a guy I really struggled with. I had him all over the place in these rankings, and I think this is a great spot to take him. Like you said, he is just so talented, and I do think that Aaron Rodgers is going to come back and play next year, just based on the kind of guy that he is. And so
he's too stubborn. That's way too exactly. He's too stubborn to go out like that.
No, yeah, he's gonna at least one more year, honestly, possibly 2. And then you're not going to get a worse quarterback situation than you had this year. So you can this is probably going to be the worst Garrett Wilson season until he gets old or he gets injured. So yeah, I'm good with this here. I've got him as, a tier under Amon-Ra St. Brown, but he's he's in this tier of receivers, and I think that's a great place to go. So I am going back to quarterback now, though, and I'm going to go Anthony Richardson. He's 21 years old, 3rd in points per game for those, first 4 weeks when he was playing. It's a little scary, though. You saw the flash, and there's so much promise, but there's such a small sample size to be like, is this who he's going to be? Were those just 3 great games, and then, it turns into just kind of like an okay quarterback who has some rushing touchdowns and big spike weeks, but also that rushing floor kind of hopefully brings some consistency. But, if I'm drafting, especially later on where it's, I want to have a guy who could be the quarterback 1. So that's why I've got him as my number 2 quarterback in this class, because I feel like, he's either going to be meh or he's going to be phenomenal. So
yeah, I mean, for me, the decision between Lawrence and AR was really just a safety thing. I think as the upside we saw from Anthony Richardson is something that I definitely would be worth chasing. I would say it just worries me a little how frequently he was getting hurt. Not that it was a freak injury, but that he'd gotten hurt 4 times this year. It was every game he was getting banged up.
He runs like a Pachycephalosaurus. And if you don't know what that is, it's the dinosaur that has like the hard thing on its head.
Oh, yeah.
He runs into stuff like he just goes like head down charge, which is awesome as a fan because like it's super exciting. But it's like, dude, you got to protect yourself. Like you could be an awesome quarterback if you stay on the field. So,
I mean, if he had stayed healthy all year and continued those points, I think we'd be talking about him and Stroud in the same conversation. But that's just like an alternative universe that didn't happen. So we don't know, right? I'm not one that usually tries to buy into injury narratives, but he got hurt so frequently that I was like a little worried that and he's going to put himself in those situations because his upside will come from running. He definitely could develop as a passer.
Yeah.
So right here at 110, just a reminder to everyone, Superflex tight end premium. Why am I saying that? I'm taking the first tight end off the board here at 110. And that's going to be Laporta, man. I just don't see how you can watch that elite of a season out of a rookie. And in a tight end premium format, we all know how dominant a top tight end can be. That if you're giving me 8 to 10 years of an elite asset at the tight end position, I'm taking it. It is worth this pick. Now it's close. So all these guys under, this is stacked, man. I was sitting there being like, who's my 36th player? And you're like, dude, I'm getting that guy at 36.
I know.
Awesome. Yeah. It really starts to group up after a couple of these elite players. But I feel great about Laporta here at 110.
Dude, this was who I was going to take next. I mean, I, for a second, almost had him over Anthony Richardson, but he's a rookie tight end who finishes the tight end 1, both overall and in points per game. So it wasn't just that Mark Andrews got hurt and would have been the tight end 1. It's like Laporta was better on a per game basis. I mean, absolute stud. He would have been even though this wasn't the best year for tight ends ever. I mean, Travis Kelce going off, he would have been at least a top 5 guy back all the way until 2015. And tight end premium, if he would have been the wide receiver 11. So you would get to play the wide receiver 11 as your tight end, which is such an asset to your dynasty team. And like you said, he's 23. Sky's the limit for him.
Yeah. I mean, it's potential he has some TD regression coming. Would I project him to be the tight end 1 overall next year? No, but he could definitely be drafted as it. I don't know. I think it's going to be a tough conversation. But this is just a great pick. He's involved, and it would be hard not to love him on your team.
No, I totally agree. And up next, I'm going to snag another quarterback. I'm going Brock Purdy. He was the leader for MVP most of the season. He's 24 years old. He's on the cheapest QB contract. So I have a feeling that those weapons are still going to be around for at least a couple more years. And he gets to play with the Avengers, like people say, but he's still making good throws. He's getting the ball out in rhythm on time. And some of those throws are dots. It's not just everything's a tiny little check down and CMC goes for 30 yards. Sure, that happens. But if you have Christian McCaffrey, throw him the ball out in some open space. So, I think that because of where he was drafted, people were skeptical of how he was playing and how they were doing, which is fair. But after a while, it's this dude can ball. And I think he belongs in that, conversation. Who's quarterback 8 in points per game this year. Besides the blow up of Baltimore, he was pretty phenomenal most of the time. So,
yeah, I mean, this is for me too. It's something where we need to be able to separate how we feel about NFL wise and fantasy wise. Now, I think Purdy's a great NFL quarterback as well. But just like you said, my things where I'm a little concerned about Brock Purdy is that the hardest teams he's played have kind of been his worst games, which makes sense. But they are so good offensively that he almost just doesn't even have the reps throwing into tight windows because those dudes are so wide open. But do you want to know where that doesn't matter? For fantasy football, because he's throwing to wide open guys and they're scoring a ton of points for him. I had him literally in the exact same slot, and I'm totally with you. He belongs here in this format. He's a quarterback, and he is in a great system. And unless somehow Kyle Shanahan gets his hand on Patrick Mahomes or Caleb Williams or something, I see Purdy as this quarterback for the next 5 years. Like, I don't know. I don't see how it changes. So to wrap up the end of the first round, I'm going to go someone here that I was curious when I was doing my rankings, kind of working through it, where I was going to put this guy. This is where I landed on. And I'm curious where you have him and if this is a surprise or if this is kind of went where you went. But I'm going my boy
Puka.
Yep, that's Puka, man.
Exactly where
the dude's about to set the rookie receiving record, playing with Cooper Kupp for about 10 games, I think. I don't know that off the top of my head. I think Kupp maybe more than 10 games.
I think it was week 5 is when Kupp came back. And
like 11, 12 games, and he missed another one. I mean, the dude's a stud. I mean, I feel like the only concern here is Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford leaving. Sean McVay leaving would be more concerning to me than Stafford leaving. I feel like if McVay's there, Puka's going to be an absolute stud. We already have basically, I don't know if guarantee is the right word, but McVay's coming back next year. Stafford's coming back. Let's not try to look too far in the future. Puka's going to be a second-round pick in redraft. How can we not have this guy this high up in Dynasty rankings? He just put up a top 10 season as a rookie. That puts him in the likes of the Jeffersons and the Chases. Just he wasn't a first-round pick like Purdy, so we're not viewing him that way, which I totally get. I'm slightly skeptical because of his future, because there's a couple unknowns. But let's not look too far ahead. This dude's a great player. And you watch him play, and he is athletic. He's big. He's in the right spot. He makes tough catches. Like, these weren't cheap points. He earned every single point he got this year.
Yeah, I mean, despite being a late-round pick, I mean, he is a phenomenal wide receiver. Like, sometimes NFL teams, their scouts, they mess up and they pass on these guys for rounds and rounds, and you see it every year. There's at least 1 or 2 players picked later on in the draft where, like, that guy is amazing. And, if he puts up another season like that, I feel like he jumps up to that, like, Amon-Ra St. Brown tier. And, he was 12th. He was 9th in points per game for the season, and he was still 12th in points per game even when Cooper Kupp was back. For all the games Kupp was back for, he was still a wide receiver 1, which is bananas. Like,
I mean, I feel watching the games down the stretch, he's been operating as the wide receiver 1, that team, with Cooper Kupp operating as the number 2. Now, Kupp could be slightly banged up still, and they could be more of a 1A, right? Like, maybe neither one's the one, and they're just both running, but they're both great players.
Yeah. Well, up next, I'm sticking at receiver, and I am going to go, there's a lot of guys to go with. I'm going to go Jalen Waddle. I think he's the oldest wide receiver in this group. He just turned 25, which still means he has lots of productive wide receiver years. Definitely a down year, but he was dealing with back issues. I mean, Tyreek was balling out, but I mean, he was a wide receiver 1 in like back-to-back seasons almost. I can't remember if his rookie year he quite was, but I know last year he was wide receiver 7. Like, rookie year he had, over 100
catches, something. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the dude is just phenomenal. And so one down year is not enough, like, especially dealing with like injuries, where I'm going to like bump him that far down.
Yeah. I this is kind of where it starts to get a lot closer for me. Puka was kind of the end of a tier for me. And it kind of just happened to work out that not only was he the end of the tier, but he was the end of the first round. Those are my top 12 guys right there, that we had written down. I love Jalen Waddle. Tyreek being as dominant as he is does scare me a bit. Let's see how long Tyreek Hill stays, because the longer he's there, the more Waddle will play second fiddle. But he's a very elite second fiddle in an elite offense who's going to be around. So we'll see. I would have to anticipate Tua is going to throw more touchdowns next year. I don't see another 20 touchdown season from Mostert or who's ever playing running back for the Dolphins. So Waddle is an immense talent, and I'd be stoked to have him on any of my dynasty teams like I do. So
I had to trade for him.
Yeah. So next is one that I think people probably would have had this guy over Waddle. I was kind of going back and forth on if I had him over Waddle, but I definitely had him behind Puka for sure. But that's going to be Olave here at wide receiver. I do love Chris Olave. I think he's a very good talent. The reason I don't have him as high as maybe Garrett Wilson, honestly, that's not really fair because Garrett Wilson had trash quarterback, but I think he gets Aaron Rodgers back, where Olave has Derek Carr again next year. They're not going to have a pick to get a quarterback. They have Derek Carr under contract, and I think Olave is a great number 2 for your dynasty team. I'm just starting to be concerned that he may not be that wide receiver 1.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he can't be a great asset for your team, which is why we're picking him this high.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, he's a phenomenal wide receiver, and you always never know exactly what's going to happen in Dynasty. Like, he could go to another team, they could bring in another quarterback after next year, and all of a sudden Olave's production skyrockets because he is so good. He's only 23 years old, so he's got a long career ahead of him. So he's my next wide receiver on the board too. But going up next, I'm going to pivot away from that position, and this is where it's tough.
It's so hard. So hard.
I've got 2 guys here, but I think I'm going to go Kyren Williams. We're going back. Yeah, this is a little spicy, personally. I mean, yes, he was a late round pick, and the Rams keep drafting running backs, but Kyren, number 1, RB2 in points per game. I mean, he is 23 years old. He's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, even coming back from being injured, like they immediately put him back in and he was the guy. And just watching him play, like the eye test, he is so shifty and elusive. Like, I've heard people talk about like him and James Robinson, and it's like James Robinson looked good his rookie year, but not the same as Kyren Williams looked this last year. I mean, just his elusiveness, his ability to hit the holes, like him being a good receiver. I think he is the complete package, and I think he deserves to be not with those top 3 guys, but he deserves to be up there in the dynasty running back rankings.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we love the running backs that but basically everyone in us 2 in unison took in the first round of this redraft in Bijan, Brees, and Gibbs, Kyren Williams outscored those guys, man, basically. Like,
he did.
I mean, he was gone, so total points, blah, 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 blah. But he was more valuable to your team than those guys were this season. And this one is so tough. It really just comes down to where you're valuing these guys. How do you value immediate production, future production, years left, blah, blah, blah. But, man, Kyren Williams, if he doesn't get any competition next year, is potentially going to be a first-round redraft pick, definitely a second round. He'll probably be on that 1.8 to 2.5 kind of turn in there, I think.
Yeah. And
if this dude puts up one more elite season, maybe 2 RB2 seasons, like that's kind of what you get out of most running backs. It's hard to expect 7-year elite careers out of anyone besides the freaks. And Kyren Williams looked great. I really can't hate on someone taking him here. The running backs got to go somewhere.
They got to go somewhere, man. They need love too.
Yeah. So up next for me, this is kind of a little wide receiver-ish run for me, but I'm going to go with another guy that I love here. I almost took this guy over Olave, to be honest, and that's going to be Devonta Smith. I just think he's a great talent. I mean, he is stuck behind A.J. Brown, so I don't know if he has top 5 wide receiver upside. But similar to how we've been talking about Waddle and Olave, the dude's an amazing wide receiver. Jalen Hurts is a great quarterback. He has his 4 or 5 week stretches where he performs as a top 10 wide receiver. He just kind of has these lulls because A.J. Brown is there as well. But route running is something that sticks with these guys throughout their career, and it's not just going to go away one day. He's not the fastest guy, but he's just such a professional wide receiver that I think Devonta Smith is just an incredible safe asset for your dynasty team, that I would love to have him on every team I have in any league.
Yeah. And I think too, like, he is a great wide receiver, but I feel like he definitely has his ceiling capped more than a lot of these other guys with AJ Brown. And also Jalen Hurts just until they ban the touch push, I feel like, it's going to limit some touchdown opportunity too for him. But I mean, he is still a phenomenal wide receiver. So I have a few guys above him, but I don't think it's necessarily wrong to take him here. I feel like this is kind of the same tier of wide receivers, and it's just like, who do you prefer a little bit more?
Yes, 100%. This is basically wide receiverville up in here, and a couple guys may sneak in and out. So up at 2-5, we're almost halfway done with the second round. Andy, who are you looking at?
So, there are a number of other wide receivers that I really like, but I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to take tight end 2. I'm going to go Trey McBride. Obviously he was in rookie drafts the previous year. He was kind of a guy that most people got at like the end of the first round, didn't do a lot his rookie year. And then once he got his opportunity, he was tight end 5 in points per game, a target machine. And I have a feeling that he's still, even if they bring in a good wide receiver, he's still going to be, a big plan in that offense just because of how good he was. Like, I think he proved it on the field. He's 24 years old. So he's got, a very long tight end career ahead of him. So in tight end premium, I don't have a problem taking him here.
Yeah, I'm pretty close with you. I had a couple more guys I think I would have taken before I went to McBride. Yeah. But he's at a unique position, tight end premium. Tight ends matter. Tight ends matter in this. The one thing that makes me just slightly tentative is like, I just tend to think they're going to bring some competition in there. But he was so elite that even if a tiny end of that got knocked off, his age mixed with his production, and obviously Kyler likes using him, and it definitely seems like Kyler's going to be back there. So I think he's a great pick. The dude was dominant in college. We didn't hear much about him his rookie year. He was stuck behind Ertz. As soon as he got a chance, he looked amazing. So it's not really his fault that Laporta got his chance earlier. We've just seen it slightly longer from Laporta because we got the whole year, whereas McBride really only got half of it.
And it's so rare, like what Laporta did, to have a breakout season year one as a tight end. I mean, most of these top tight ends, like, Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce, like they had okay rookie years, but like it wasn't like anything extreme like what Laporta did. So I think he's kind of an outlier. Usually tight ends break out, maybe start of year 2, but really it's like a year 3 for that position. So I don't think his rookie year production proves that he can't be an elite guy.
Okay, so next up for me at 2-6, this is just getting so incredibly difficult. I'm gonna go T. Higgins. There's someone else that I'm basically deciding between him. I'm gonna go Higgins, and this is on the not assumption, but the hope that T. Higgins is on a different team next year as the wide receiver 1, where he can fully just utilize a higher target share than he's probably going to get stuck behind Chase in Cincinnati. But, T. Higgins ended the year on a dominant stretch with a banged up Chase because he is that elite of a player. It just sometimes this perfect situation is needed as well to get that elite season. Similar to Devonta, Waddle, Olave, that's really this whole group. They're so tied together. And even the next wide receiver that I was talking about, who you're probably taking next, or one of us is taking within the next couple picks. Yeah. It's just hard when you have multiple really elite weapons around you. It's going to be hard to get that full target share to really give you that Justin Jefferson season. So,
yeah. And kind of like with Devonta right now, like his ceiling is definitely capped, and same with, Waddle by having a stud in front of him. But if he goes to a new team, now I don't think he's as talented as Jamar Chase, but he can be a wide receiver 1 for a team, and, he could be a great fantasy guy. So,
okay, 2-7, halfway through the second round. Andy, where are we going?
Yeah, and I think this is a little bit dependent on, do you want full upside or do you want a safety net with still some good upside? And I'm going to go Jordan Addison here. I mean, he was wide receiver 17 in points per game from week 5 on, once Justin Jefferson was out, and then including the game when, the games when JJ came back, which he did not finish the year strong, but look at who was playing quarterback for the Vikings. But he's proven that he's an amazing route runner. He can make great catches. He's not even 22 years old yet. And, this is an offense too, if Kirk comes back, how much they like to throw, that it can definitely support 2 wide receiver ones for fantasy football, like redraft, dynasty, whatever. So I think he might not have finish as a top 5 ceiling, but he definitely has a wide receiver 1 ceiling that I think he could hit.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing where if you could only hope that, as pass heavy as we think the Dolphins are, those rushing touchdowns really murdered Tua and Waddle, especially because Tyreek Hill got his.
Yeah.
But the Vikings with their head coach, they are that pass happy. So if he comes back, there is nothing that I 100% believe that Addison, Jefferson, and Hawkinson can all get theirs, especially with the lack of an immense running game. I think they'll have a sufficient running game, unless they bring someone in, free agent, whatever. But I don't really see that happening when they're going to have to pay Jefferson. They're going to have to pay Cousins if they want him back, et cetera. Addison's a great player, and you can't go wrong with him here. He looked great as a rookie.
Oh, just a little question here. I was looking. I think T. Higgins was drafted in 2020.
So he was. No.
I was like, I don't remember putting him on my list even. I was like, how did I forget T. Higgins?
I just have always grouped him in with Devonta Smith and Waddle in every rankings I've ever done. So my 2.8, I'm just gonna put it 2.6, and then I'll do another one. Yeah. But the guy I would have gone would be JSN, wide receiver. I'll quickly talk about JSN. Such a mistake by me. But JSN, similar thing, right? I think we expected a slower rookie year for JSN. Great talent. I really hope they move on from Geno. I think it's a great story, but I just think he had that 1 year, and I just kind of think the magic ain't there anymore. Here's to Russ going back to Seattle, man. I'm just joking. But, he's a great player, and I think over the next 2 years, Lockett and Metcalf will be faded out, or one of them will be off the team. And I think JSN can really take over as the number 1 for that team. But due to the fact that we may have to wait a bit for JSN to be that fully elite asset, I still think I have him behind some of these other guys. And for 2.8, I guess because I messed up, but for 2.8, I'm going to go back into the running back pool here. And that's going to be ETN, running back for the Jags. He's a little up and down. I'm not going to say he's the safest asset, but he's tied to a good offense. I'm not going to say great, but he's on that first-round deal. He still has a couple more years on it. He'll probably get tagged. We all know the stuff that's happening with these running backs. So I feel pretty good that I'm getting 2 to 3 more years out of Etienne at running back, which is good enough for me where I'm getting a top 15 guy for the next 3 years. I'll take that.
Yeah, and I'm just curious, how do you view, him missing his rookie year? He is going to be 25, but it almost feels because he missed that year that really we shouldn't put him in that same category just because, that wasn't, it was him coming back from an injury, but it wasn't those, hits on his body. It was him, recovering. So, yeah, I don't mind it here. I feel there's 2 other running backs, maybe 3, a few that are kind of, in that same tier. There's a couple guys I might take above him, but he was amazing to start the year. He was a top 5 running back. And then, the Jags just started struggling and it kind of fell apart for their whole offense, but he is a great player.
Yeah. And I think the regression will kind of come and go. I think he scored a bunch and Lawrence wasn't, but then their offense wasn't looking as good. So I think that'll kind of balance out over the next couple of years. So 2-9, we got 4 picks left in the second round.
Yeah. So I'm going to stick at running back, and I'm going to go Kenneth Walker here. Just turned 23. He was RB 14 points per game if you take out the game where he got injured. And I mean, he looked so explosive, especially in some of those last games where, everybody was worried about Charbonnet coming in and taking some snaps. And that is a bit of a concern, but you look at them both on the field side by side, and it's so clear that Kenneth Walker is the better running back. So I'm not, as afraid of Charbonnet as I was to start the season, but, so maybe he's, hampered a little bit by that, but he's just such a good player that hopefully they get a slightly better O-line and give him some more opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I just think the fact that he was even able to put up that season this year when, even though Seattle's record has been decent, their team was kind of a mess offensively. Their running game didn't look great. Their O-line was crap for the first half of the season. And I was in the camp before the year that I wasn't worried about Charbonnet. I kept Walker in my top 10 RBs as a Dynasty guy before the season, throughout the year. I'm glad he kind of had my back, or just kind of showed people that he's a very good player. He's not Bijan, he's not Brees, but he is that next tier talent-wise. Yeah. And, good old Petey Sunshine loves to establish the run. So Walker will continue to be involved. Maybe Charbonnet will get a little more involvement next year, but not that many backfields are given 80, 90% touches to guys. So I just kind of struggle to see that as a reason to not rank someone in where kind of we're putting them. Right?
Yeah.
So we kind of took a break from this position, that being quarterback. I think now's about the time I'm willing to take another stab, and that's going to be Justin Fields. Mm-hmm. Fields is so tough. He has this immense upside, and he looks so good sometimes. But come next year, he could be on a different team with a different coach, learning a different system, and he could see his career go the way of Sam Darnold. We don't really know, right? Like, it's hard to project, but I think kind of here is where I'm willing. I had him behind all these wide receivers that we just took. I think that was kind of the stance that I was taking, that I would prefer the safety of these wideouts to Justin Fields. But now I'm willing to take the risk at quarterback of the upside Fields could have. He's had stretches both of the last couple of years where he's been a top 10, borderline top 5 guy, especially last year, where he's shown enough upside that definitely if he stays, I think I would be more willing to have him maybe even a little higher. I think if you were guaranteed that he was staying, I think you could argue taking him a couple slots higher, but that tiny bit of risk has him a little lower for me.
Yeah, I mean, if the Bears trade that pick and they draft like Marvin Harrison Jr. or what's his face from LSU or Washington, like they add another great wide receiver to this room, then I think he definitely jumps up for me. But the uncertainty is a big part of it. And, some games, like you said, he looks like the quarterback of the future. And some games it's like, dude, well, what are you doing out there? So,
yeah, I mean, dude, if they trade down and you put Justin Fields on this team and Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors, I'm a huge DJ Moore fan. I think Cole Kmet is underrated. The dude's pretty good. He puts up great numbers, good blocker. He's involved. He's big. If you guaranteed me that, Fields would be a lot higher. Yeah. So, Andy, 211, who are you looking at?
So Fields would have been my pick there, but I'm gonna go back to wide receiver. I'm gonna take Zay Flowers. Wide receiver 34 in points per game, so not huge, but he's looked good and he's gotten the opportunities, and I feel like that role is only gonna grow. He is an elite talent. I think he's gonna be the wide receiver 1 for that team. He's 23 years old. I don't know. This is one of those riskier ones where, because for a while it was Bateman there and he was going to be the guy. So you just got to hope that Flowers can really take that next step. But I think I'm willing to risk it from what I've seen.
Yeah, it's really not the talent. I think it's just the tiny amount of boom bust that has us both just a little tentative. Yeah. If he was getting 7 to 8 targets every game, you would feel so great about Flowers. And I think you could make the argument that he should almost be taken over Waddle up in that tier if he was getting those targets, because Lamar looks great, man. And he's going to get himself a second MVP and he fully deserves it.
For sure.
But it's tough on that offense. Lamar's going to run some in. they got Gus Edwards, and if Gus Edwards leaves, they're going to find themselves another Gus Edwards to get those cheap little TDs. Mark Andrews is going to be back. Isaiah Likely's not going away after what he just did to finish this season out.
Spoiled by riches in Baltimore.
So I'm with you. I love the talent of Flowers, and I love the offense. So those are two of the things I definitely look for that I'm willing to at least put some stock into.
Yeah.
So to finish off the second round here, this is one I was kind of curious where you were going to have this guy, if it was going to be you drafting him or me. I think he's going to be a very interesting one in startups this year. He's going to be an interesting one for trades this offseason to see where he lands. And that's going to be Tank Dell at wide receiver. I just think he's the guy. I'm putting my stock that he's the one and not Nico Collins, even though Nico looked pretty good. CJ Stroud wanted this guy, and you can see why. He was elite on the field. He was one of those guys that not only gets separation, but he gets 3 yards of separation. Now, his size is definitely a factor. He did get hurt, but I would imagine going into next year, they're not going to put him blocking in goal line anymore after this time. And really the only thing that does worry me is I do see a situation where the Texans maybe add even a third wide receiver, but it's not guaranteed. So I think I'm just betting on that offense, and I'll happily be tied to CJ Stroud for the next 5 years.
Yeah. And, this is a guy too, where I was kind of struggling with where do I put him? Like for a while, he was up there, ahead of Addison and Flowers and Smith and JSN. But, the injury is a little concerning. The size is a little concerning. And hopefully, if he stays healthy, I think he belongs up there. And, he was wide receiver 11 in points per game until he got hurt. So, yeah, I think this is a great spot to take him. I think this is kind of a steal, getting him this late almost because of what he could be.
Yeah, just absolutely electric. So for the third round, what Andy and I are going to do, just because we've kind of gone on so far in the video, we're just going to go back and back. We're just going to do our picks, but we're not going to comment on each other's, but we'll still give you the last 12 players here. Just if you guys are curious, or if you have drafts or trades, or you're just seeing kind of how these guys stack up against each other. So Andy, kick us off with 3-1.
Yeah, well, I think this one could be a little controversial. I think people either love him, they think he should have gone way higher or way lower, and that's Devon Achane. 22 years old, RB4 in points per game. Massive weeks, lower weeks. Obviously, his size being kind of a concern, and that's really why I don't have him higher is, they're saying Gibbs was small, but he's still a 200-pound running back, where Achane, I think he's 180 pounds, 170 pounds. And, can he hold up throughout an entire season? Because if he can, he belongs way higher than this. But I think, that's a built-in risk with him. But at this point, I'm willing to take it.
Yeah, he's definitely on my list, so I'm with you. 3-2, I'm going to go Rashee Rice. This was a tough one. I didn't really know where to have him. Obviously, we get to the third round, and my text has all of a sudden gotten really tiny. That's okay. We're saying the names out loud. Rashee Rice on the Chiefs. Upside is number 1 target for Patrick Mahomes moving forward. I think floor is he's the number 2 on that team. So I'll take either one of those at this point, whether it's the 1, whether it's the 2. He looked great this year after the catch, and I would love to have that on my squad.
Yeah, I don't mind that there. Would be a little concerned if they draft a guy in the first round or bring in a big guy, but he's turned into a stud. Going up next, I'm going to take another tight end. I'm going to go Dalton Kincaid. He was the tight end 1 in Dynasty going into the draft last year. He's got still so much potential. He didn't break out this year, but that's normal for tight ends. He's tied to a great offense. If he gets the job where it's just him himself, I think that, he can thrive in it. So, yeah, I would be totally willing to take him here in the tight end premium.
Yeah, love Dalton Kincaid. Do not need to convince me. I was kind of struggling on where to put these tight ends. I knew I'd have Laporta up there, but it was really hard on where to land with the other guys. So my next one is someone that, beginning of the season, I think we would have had this guy a lot earlier. just enough happened this year that I'm going to have him a little later, and that's going to be Drake London. Just honestly, I don't think I need to really beat this one over the head, or that's not a saying, but I meant to say some other saying. Arthur Smith. That's it, dude. If you gave this guy anyone but Arthur Smith, I would have had this guy probably up there with Jalen Waddle. I think he's a great player. I think he goes and gets the ball. I'm just slightly concerned if I have to sit through another year of Arthur Smith.
Yeah, so how old is Drake London? Just off the top of your head.
22.
Yeah, he's still 22 years old. Like, he is younger than Zay Flowers. He's younger than Tank Dell. He's younger than, by 3 years, he's younger than Devonta Smith, which is crazy. So he still has so much opportunity. Up next, I'm sticking at wide receiver. I'm going Jaden Reed. He's 23 years old, wide receiver 14 in points per game after their bye. I think he's taken over as the number one wideout. I love Christian Watson. I love Dobbs. I mean, I'm a huge Packer fan, so I love all those guys, but Jaden Reed just seems like he's the most complete wide receiver, and he can stay healthy and on the field. He's kind of peaked in all the right ways. And I mean, if Jordan Love stays looking as good as he has, you're going to want the number one wide receiver on the Packers.
Yeah, big Jaden Reed fan. So I'm with you there. Oh, this is getting so difficult. I'm going to go back to tight end, and I feel gross taking Falcons, but I'm just going to go Kyle Pitts. The upside's there. The upside is there. If it could turn around next year, if they get a new quarterback, it could turn around if he goes to a different team. It could turn around if Arthur Smith goes away. A lot of things I think it could turn around. And just kind of like we've been talking about Drake London, Kyle Pitts, still incredibly young. I can't see how we can just write him off yet. If Eric Ebron can have a career resurgence, Kyle Pitts can have one too.
Yeah, he's 23 years old. Like, there are a lot of tight ends coming out in the draft this year that are older than Kyle Pitts is, and he's been in the league for 3 years. I mean, he was amazing as a rookie, just didn't get the touchdowns. He's still that great player, so I think it can happen for him. Up next, this is where I would take Nico Collins. He's had 1,100 yards in 14 games this year. Huge boom games, tied to CJ Stroud. I think he and Tank Dell could either be a 1A, 1B, or maybe one of them takes over. There's still a chance. I think it's going to be Dell, but there's a chance it could be Nico Collins. But I think he's still going to be so heavily featured that he's going to be a great asset for years to come.
Okay, moving. I totally did type that one down. You put Nico, correct?
Nico, baby.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I have Tank Dell over him, but I still think Nico Collins is someone I would want on my team. Wide receiver wise, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to go George Pickens. He's up and down, but the talent is there for me. And I liked the late season resurgence from him, having a couple big games. I think that's big just going into next year or the playoffs or anything. If they can just throw this dude the ball, I really don't see how he doesn't produce. That's really the thing that's been lacking, is just giving him the ball. And that sounds easy, but that's an issue for London, Pitts, Pickens. It was an issue for some of these players before they got the right quarterback. It happens, but the talent is there for Pickens.
No. Or do you think they're going to make him block anymore, or do you think his blocking days are done?
I think he's done, man. I think he's just running go routes on run plays and just letting the cornerback chase.
Fair enough.
Just chase him.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to go back to running back here. I think there's two guys who are pretty close, but I'm going to go James Cook. They've kind of used him a lot more. The Bills have been leading on the running game. They're using him in screens as well. I think that, he's just about to turn 25, but he's only been in the league for a couple years. So I think he's still got a lot of tread on those tires. That's about all I have to say about him.
Yeah. I mean, good offense. I don't think he's disappearing as long as he's on his rookie deal. He's not really someone who I think is an immense talent, but he was productive this year, and we can't really overlook that. 310, I'm going to go another running back, and that's going to be Mr. Typewriter feat, Isaiah Pacheco.
Ooh, all right.
I don't really know if 5 years from now he's going to be around even, But for now, he looks good.
So
even if he starts to share the backfield next year with someone, I think he's going to have his role that I just feel like he's never going to be a guy I would trade multiple first-round picks for, but I just feel like if you're his owner, you're probably not taking less than a first. So
yeah,
he's on a good offense and he looks good. He scores points, man. The more he's on the field, the more he produces. That's a pretty good ratio I'll take, right? You take Jerick McKinnon and CEH off the field last week, Pacheco drops a 20 bomb. It happens. But he runs the ball and he runs hard. If he could just figure out how to keep his helmet on, because just strap it, dude.
I love watching him run. It's so much fun watching him run. But yeah, well, for my last pick, and with the 3 classes, these are all still first round guys. If you to break up the classes, and I think this is real tough here. I like Rachaad White, I like Jake Ferguson. Luke Musgrave is almost getting into consideration. Josh Downs, Jahan Dotson, but as a Packer fan, I think I'm going to go Christian Watson here. And now, if I was a win now team, I would go Rachaad White for sure. I think he could have another good year, but also running back can be so fluctuating. And Watson has just been so elite when he's on the field. It's just he spent more time almost off the field than on the field. And when he's on your bench hurt, he can't get you any fantasy points, which is unfortunate, but I guess that's the way it is. In my Madden season the other day, he had 200 yards. So you just got to stay out there.
Pretty good. That's pretty good. What are you playing on? Rookie?
All pro. We're working our way up, dude.
All pro. I've yet to join a league where you get points when they don't play games, but it could be coming. I'm actually really happy with the way it played out. I don't think there's a better guy to describe 312 or the Mr. Irrelevant of this exercise better than Bryce Young. I just think this is the grossest pick of the day. I don't love it, but the dude was the #1 overall pick. He's going to get his shot for probably his whole rookie deal, and he's still a quarterback. So I just think all of those things are enough for me to slide him in right around here. I had no interest in drafting him anywhere earlier, but this is right about where I was like, Bryce Young. Oh, no. Andy, why don't you give us a couple of your honorable mentions who were guys that maybe you would have drafted if we went 2 or 3 more picks? Just give us a quick list of names.
Yeah, I think especially in a win now team, Rachaad White ended the season so strong. But, who knows if they're going to bring in another guy or if the offense is still going to run the same. Jake Ferguson was the tight end 7 from week 8 on. I think he's going to be tied to Dak Prescott in that offense for a few more years. They love him in the red zone. Musgrave looks great. A little worried about Kraft coming in. And then, there's a few other wide receivers and running backs who are kind of on the list too, but who else do you got that I didn't mention?
I think Javonte Williams is one that I definitely almost took. I kind of was deciding between him and Pacheco, to be honest. And when I went Pacheco, I kind of thought that Bryce Young not deserved to be on here, but probably was the correct choice just because I just do like quarterbacks, man. I think, just like you said, I think Ferguson's close. In my Dynasty rankings, the guy I have right after Ferguson is Michael Mayer. I didn't think we got to see a ton of him, but he still is a young tight end. I'm not ruling him out after his first season. Yeah. Similar to Luke Musgrave. I just think these guys are, they're around. I'm not saying that they're going to be league winning assets. Another one that honestly, I do not remember his draft year because I don't have it written down, but would Jaylen Warren qualify? I think that would be an interesting guy. I feel like this is his 3rd season, maybe. But
drafted in 2022, so yeah.
I think Jaylen Warren, kind of could start to slot in here. Josh Downs, I think those are a couple guys. But like you said, I think kind of right here at the end, I think right after about Pacheco is where I think I would stop trading a first-round pick for these assets. I think I'd be willing to do late firsts for Pacheco if I wanted him. Same with Cook. I think Pickens and Collins, you're probably looking at a first in a couple seconds. I don't think I'm giving them away for cheaper. And then as we start to really go up, it's just like you're starting to look at a bunch of multiple first guys. Like,
yeah, like
it's
some
stacked.
Yeah, top like dynasty assets if you're taking in all the classes considered. So
yeah, 100%. So hopefully you guys enjoyed Andy and I's little exercise. Bit longer than our Flex Friday videos, but it's the off season. We all have much less to do. And we're going to be coming at you with some other unique, fun stuff. So definitely tune in and watch. I had a bunch of fun doing this. Andy, thanks for hopping in. And let's see how this looks a year from now. Maybe we revisit this next January and see if we were smart or just complete idiots. So thank you guys for watching and have a good day.